whether you're the boss or you're talking to yourself or you're talking to your kids, how you view the thing is like, there's nothing to be fixed because there's nothing wrong with you.
Our guest today has numerous college degrees, tons of certifications and awards for her innovative breakthroughs in dyslexia and ADHD. For 30 years, she specialized in helping kids change the trajectory of their lives by removing obstacles from learning. For the last 10 years, she's been focused on entrepreneurs with dyslexia and ADHD. She calls herself the brain changer for game changers. Welcome to the show, Dr. Phyllis Books.
Thank you so much for having me. Delighted.
Yeah, very excited. I mean, I'm fascinated by the work that you do. Though I don't have a formalized diagnosis, I suspect I would be the individual in the category that you would most likely serve. And being a member of Strategic Coach, being someone who's Colby certified, I find there tends to be a trend, almost to some degree,
Mhm.
with a lot of high performing entrepreneurs that maybe don't fit in the box. And I would imagine something must have led you into this work. And was it the feeling of maybe not fitting into a box yourself at some point in time in your life?
35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic and 70% are ADHD. So you are all out of the box thinkers. And I grew up in rural Wisconsin where there wasn't a box to fit in or out of. But I grew up with, yes, with not being so understood. And I always say I'm the living proof. I believe I'm the proof that there's hope. Because whether it's dyslexia or ADHD, whatever it is, I'm the living proof that change is possible. And if I made it through, so can you. And the fact is, because I made it through some pretty rough times, some pretty horrific childhood incidents, and if I made it, I have great hope. And I know deep in my heart that you can make it to the other side too. You just have to want to and be willing to do what it takes.
When did you start to realize that that possibility existed for yourself? Did it start to show up for you at an early age as you were going through challenges that you could almost manifest and create the life that you wanted by, even being someone who was maybe a little bit different than those around you?
I was one of those people that was very difficult to diagnose because I was a smart little kid and, you can work your way around things and you don't even know you're doing workarounds. You just do things and you have no idea why you did it or how you did it. And so it took a long time for anybody to figure out that I had any issues because I could cover them up really well. Eventually, as you know, with most entrepreneurs that I find is it you can cover up and you can do what you do really well, but you do it at the expense of other parts of you. And eventually the other parts like wear out and get tired, and
Mhm.
those parts don't work very well. So I had a lot of allergies as a kid. Nobody knew they were allergies. I just had strep throat a couple of times a year, and nobody put the puzzle pieces together because I've been around the block for 7 decades now. So there were a lot of things we just didn't know, and so yeah.
Well, that's very interesting, and especially what you identify about what you recognize in entrepreneurs. And how did your work begin with a focus on helping kids? Because you spent a huge component of your life's work there, and you've kind of transitioned to we'll call them the big kids, I guess, the entrepreneur class.
I never had any intention of being a doctor. I never had any intention of working with dyslexia. I know people didn't even know what it was 30 years ago. However, my father was probably dyslexic. He used to
Mm.
say, I read a book once. And my first husband, who was a college professor, one day said, I think he means that. Because from, from my professor husband, reading was like what you did all the time. That the fact that my dad read one book once was just a world he didn't understand. So I grew up with him. He was in sales, which is a very good place for people with dyslexia and ADHD. And he was really good with people. But he would call me from his office. Hey, Polly, how do you spell blah, blah, blah? Hey, Polly, how do you do this? Because he knew he didn't know the answer, but he didn't know what it was. And there was no place to turn. So I grew up around people with dyslexic traits, but and I saw the pros and the cons. I mean, there are a lot of pros. I mean, you think outside the box, When other people are giving up, you're just revving up because you don't expect things necessarily to come easy because you don't learn the way other people learn. And so when other people are tired, like you're going, oh yeah, well, I know it's not this and I know it's not this. So now I'm ready to settle down. And so it gives you a really good grit and ability to hang in there when other people have given up. You know, the smart kids, the ones who got it easy, give up a lot easier too, because they never had to work so hard for something. So you can get an incredible work ethic with dyslexia and ADHD.
You've been able to discover this over the years, but it sounds like you were very observant to it. You started to see almost like patterns to some degree in the people around you.
Well, so the joke is really, God is such a comedian sometimes. I was on the plane on the way to Spain. I was engaged to a Wall Street attorney, getting ready to live the good life. And this male voice out of the left side of nowhere says, so aren't you a chiropractor? And it was like, that made zero sense to me. I never consciously considered it in my life. And yet there was no human being that said that to me. And I got on my yellow pen, and I wrote down all the reasons it actually fit
Mm,
because I'd been doing financial planning and estate work. And so I understood a lot how people operate, but I never thought about, I never thought about going into healthcare. It was not my paradigm at all. I didn't want to be a doctor as a kid. I didn't want to be a nurse as a kid. Um, so this meshes is, and so, eventually it's easier to do what you're told when the big guy's talking.
mm,
And so it meant that I had to go back to school. I mean, I had to go, so then I had to go back to school, and I already had a master's degree, but it wasn't in anything to do with science. And so I had to go back and I had to learn a whole different way of learning and I couldn't, the thing was, I couldn't explain to anybody why I was doing it. I mean, it didn't make any sense to me. And yet it's one of those things you can't not do. And, um, and then when I started, when I started learning the chemistry and what was going on, it was actually my master's degree in communication that was my toggle because I had this degree in communication. And so, you know, I would be working with somebody from Pillsbury or AT&T and some they would have that same quizzical look in their face, some of 'em, as the kids did in the classroom, like,
mm.
you knew darn well whatever you were talking about was not getting through. And like 98% of the people, yes, but there's always a couple that just like, and I'm going, "Wonder why are they not getting it?" And so I had all these very sophisticated verbal strategies, but what I learned was that wasn't where the problem was, and so but I had to go if I'd just been a chiropractor, I never would have seen it. If I'd just been a teacher, I never would have seen it.
Mm,
I had to stand back and look at, like, what system isn't working? Like, why isn't Johnny why are they not getting it? And is it a problem in the brain, or is it a problem in the immune system, or is it in the musculoskeletal system? The problem wasn't where everybody thought it was is not where it was.
mm.
And so when I could come back and look at it from a very different perspective, the answer became very obvious. It's just not obvious to most people because have to think outside the box to come up with a solution like this. And most people are much more comfortable in their boxes. And big institutions like education and medicine do not like to be messed with. They want you to say they want you in their paradigm, even though it may not work. They would rather have you stay there. So that's another thing about being an entrepreneur. You got to have kind of tough skin because you know you're going to go up against opposition. And you have to be tough enough to just weather the storm and believe in it enough to do it anyway. And
Yeah.
that's what I've done.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. That's absolutely incredible. And it sounds like, I mean, it's been a pretty incredible journey. I would imagine there's been a number of challenges facing, let's call it, we'll use air quotes for conventional wisdom,
Yes. The
doing
central dogma.
doing
Yes.
things unconventionally, against the grain, going against the grain. And I'm curious, where did you start to begin to see traction as you went down that road? Because I'd imagine there was some head smashing against the wall experiences, and trying to communicate to people how you would be able to help and serve them in the way that you realized it was possible.
It's still an issue because people still, even I've been doing it 20 or 30 years and people still go, but that's not possible. And I'm going, it just happened. Just look what happened is, and Albert Einstein, who was such an innovator, when it came to quantum physics, he said, I know it's there. I know all the facts are there. I just don't want to believe it. And that's true with a lot of people. When they get a belief system or they get a way of looking at something, they don't really want to change it, even though it could help them. I had a lady she worked, she was a stuntman in Hollywood, and her son came in, and so all the kids were, all of his classmates were sons and daughters of actors and actresses. And the mom came back and she said, look, there's a solution. Your kid doesn't have to be dyslexic. Like, what could happen to my son? And they went, no, it's okay. We'll just keep going to this school. They had 3 or 4 kids and the tuition was like $50,000 a year. It's like, it's okay. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. It was like, there's a solution right there, but that doesn't mean people will do it. So, my biggest frustration is still just getting people to open their belief system to that change is possible. And, I understand because people have been disappointed a lot.
Mm.
When you've been told you're dyslexic or you're getting not punished in school because you're not sitting still and it looks like you're not listening, but you really are. And you get all these things as eventually you just don't, you just go, that's the way it is. And I'm going to figure out how to make this work within this system. And then I say, just a minute, the system can change. You go, oh, no, 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 no. I don't think I can handle another change.
Hmm.
So the change comes from the system. It also comes from people who've just been beaten down or worn down or just don't want to get their hopes up anymore. They just don't want to be disappointed again.
I can see that absolutely. Well, and I'm excited to talk more about this when we come back after this commercial break.